there, welcome to another lecture in writing your research paper. Today I will be discussing writing of your chapter 1. Chapter 1 usually constitutes the introduction or the problem, or in some format, the problem and its background. In this format that I am presenting, the problem and its background is composed of the following. First, the background of the study, which explains why you are performing the study. Next to that is the statement of the problem, which outlines the concern that needs to be addressed, followed by the objectives of the study, which indicates how your aim will be achieved. And basically your aim or your research aim describes the purpose of your study. Following the objectives of the study is the significance of the study, which tells the reader how the findings affect the topic or the broad field. In other words, this significance of the study is about how much the findings matter. And then we have the scope and limitation of the study, which tells about the coverage of the study as well as possible limitation due to some constraints. And finally, the definition of terms, which could be some technical terms or jargon that you will use in that particular study. Let's examine each of these parts of chapter 1, and hopefully we'll be able to learn how to write each of these parts effectively, as I will be presenting also some framework that can help you in writing each of these parts. With the background of the study. So the background of the study establishes the context of the research. So take note of the word context. So you are placing what is the context of your research. So this section explains why this particular research topic is important, and it is essential also to the understanding of the main aspects of your study. Usually, the background forms the first section of your research paper, and it justifies the need for conducting the study, as well as it summarizes what the study aims to achieve. Here is a framework that you can use in writing the background of the study. It is an interesting background if it follows this inverted pyramid of information from general information to specific information. General information, which could consist of the background knowledge, the known facts about your topic, the areas of uncertainty, sometimes it's called the research gap or the gap in research, and the last paragraph is your aim. To give us a better framework that we can use, an easier one that we can use in writing the background of or the rationale of our study, introduce to you the CARS model. CARS here means create a research space. So the CARS model can help you build the background of the study. This model consists of 3 rhetorical moves that will help you identify the background, the motivation, and the focus of your research. And this can help also give your reader a basic overview of your larger project. So this model is composed of the following move. First one, we have move number 1 or move 1, wherein the researcher establishes a research territory. So in this part, the researcher territory or broad topic is the context required to both understand and conduct the research being explored. And your goal in this move is to explain the current state of scholarship and in the topic, in the field, and answer the question, why is this general research area important? Later on, I will be giving an example how we can establish a research territory. Move 2 is about establishing a niche. The niche is the reason or the motivation for your research. You are preparing your audience to understand how your research relates to the background you have given in Move 1, highlighting the gaps or the problems and the current knowledge that justify or explain the need for further investigation. And Move 3 consists of occupying the niche. This step is an explanation of how you are responding to the need for further investigation. Explain how your research addresses the need you have identified in Move 2 and list your specific research objectives, questions, or methods. So let us do this, have an example for each move. And later on, our goal is that we can make the background of the study for a specific example. So again, Move 1 is about establishing a research territory. So it's about the broad topic. It's about the context of your research. It is where you answer the question, why is this general research area important? So the language that you can use for establishing a research territory could be, for example, blank has been extensively studied, or interest in blank has been growing. Or you may also say recent studies have focused on. Or you may also use blank has become a major issue. So these are just prompts by which we can establish a research territory. So basically in Move 1, we're trying to get the attention of the reader or the audience to believe that this study is really, this research area is really an important research area. So you can use this language, this template, in writing the first paragraph of your background of the study. For us to appreciate this move, let us have an example. Say for example, if your research area is about stress, your Move 1 can be stated in this form. So here we have stress is an ever-present factor in the lives of university students, many of whom have difficulty regulating stress and functioning to their fullest potential. Many individuals choose to relieve their stress by listening to music, and stress relief as a result of music listening has been researched through both physiological and self-perception studies. Music listening decreases physiological stress by indirectly decreasing cortisol levels, a hormone linked to high-level stress, through a down-regulation of the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal or HPA axis. That is according to Linneman, Ditzin, Strahler, Duer, and Nater 2015. Studies focus on self-perceived stress levels found that listening to music with the goal of relaxation is significantly more effective than listening to music for the purpose of distraction according to self-report measures. So in this paragraph, in the first paragraph of your background of the study, basically you are just trying to explain the general area of your research, the context of your research. This is where you get the attention of the audience that your specific research is related to something that is general, that is being experienced by many people. So that's why it also still follows the inverted pyramid format, where you start with a broad topic or a general topic. So in this example, it's about stress. So the author is basically just describing stress and the effects of stress and the ways that people addresses stress. In this case, individuals who experience stress, say students. The next move is move number 2. This is where you establish a niche. So again, the niche is the reason or the motivation for the research. In this part, you are preparing your audience to understand how your research relates to the background that you have given. So in our example, stress. So you will highlight the gaps or the problems and the existing knowledge that justify or explain that there is a need for investigation about that particular topic. So here are methods for establishing a niche. First is you can make a counterclaim. So how do we do that? we can make a counterclaim by stating that there is something that is wrong, that is ongoing, there is an issue. Or perhaps you can also indicate a gap, that something is missing, something is not known, and because of that missing information or missing knowledge, the solution to the problem cannot be found. So there is a gap. Third is raise a question or make an inference. So you can do that by saying or stating that something is unclear about the current state of the knowledge about that particular topic. Or you may also continue a tradition by adding something about what has been studied or what has been known about the topic. So these are just some methods by which we can establish a niche based on our research topic or research interest. So the language that we can use in establishing a niche, so we can say, for example, previous studies of blank have not examined. So in this part you are saying that something is not known because they did not examine this particular area of the topic. Or perhaps you can say such studies are unsatisfactory because, so you are saying that something is wrong or not satisfying about the previous studies about this topic. Or you can also say one question that needs to be asked, however. So here basically you are adding into what has been asked already, what has been answered, but there is still something that needs to be answered. Or you may also say research on blank has mostly been restricted to. So here you are saying that there is still a possibility to do research on another area of that particular phenomenon that you are investigating. Our example about the topic of stress. Here is an example for which you can write now the move number 2. While the positive relationship between music listening and stress relief has been supported within the general population, little research has been done to examine music's effect on the mental health and stress levels of university students in particular. University students exhibit a higher rate of both stress-induced depression and anxiety than the general population due to the pressures of completing complex programs while often living away from home for the first time. And they cited authors also who said that. As a result, student stress relief is a critical part of ensuring student well-being, especially with student mental health at the forefront of many decent discussion among university, faculty, staff, and students. So in this move, basically the researcher is arguing that even if there are already studies that have been conducted about the effect of music listening to stress relief, however, there is still little research that has been conducted in the context of the university students. And they claim, based on what these authors said, that university students exhibit a higher rate of both stress-induced depression. And hence they were able to convince us that there is really a need to do a further research on this topic, but this time considering the university students. So in move number 2, it's also an essential factor to include what other researchers have said. So you have to support your claim with research, with previous studies, with citations. Finally, you have move number 3. Move number 3 is where you occupy the niche. So this step is an explanation of how you are responding to the need for further investigation. Take note that in move 2, you are saying that there is a need for further investigation. So in move number 3, this is your time now to explain how your research addresses the need that you have identified in the previous step and list your specific research objectives, questions, or methods. Here are some strategies for occupying the niche. First, you have to outline the purpose of your research. It's your research aim. List research questions or hypotheses. You may also announce principal research findings if your study is already finished, or indicate the structure of your research process. Languages that you can use for occupying the niche. For example, you can use the statement, the purpose of this literature review is to, or you may also use this study aims to, or you may also use the evidence collected from this study demonstrates or will demonstrate if it is still a proposal, or you may also use this review outlines or examines. So basically, you are saying here what you're going to do. Right? In our research topic about stress, this is how you can write the Move 3. This investigatory survey is the first step in a multi-stage study on how undergraduate residents at Conrad Grebel University College use music in relation to stressful situations and how stress relief through music listening is perceived. We hypothesize, so basically now they are stating their hypothesis that students will report stress relief as one of the primary reasons they choose to listen to music, and that they will report choosing music they enjoy when they need to relieve stress. Patterns observed in student responses will be used to determine specific research questions for further investigation, and research on student stress relief could help to inform university policymakers on ways to create healthier campuses. So as you can notice in the last sentences, they are now stating the significance of their study, as this can help to inform university policymakers to create healthier campuses. So based on what we have done so far in that example of a research topic on stress and its relationship with music listening, this is how now you can write the whole background of the study using Move 1, where you put your research in context by describing the general area of research where it belongs. In the second paragraph, where you now establish the niche by identifying research gaps from previous literature, where you also cite literatures. And finally, where you now occupy the niche by stating your purpose, and as well as you can state the methods or as well as the significance of your research. So a 3-paragraph for the background of the study is already good, as long as it is backed by literatures, by it is theoretically being argued in the way that you write the background of the study. It doesn't have to be long, as long it has to be in as much as possible 1 to 2 pages. I also here have some example in the context of engineering research. So we have here sample background of the study. So in this first paragraph, the researcher is basically explaining that globally, about 42% of electricity is generated by coal-fired power plants, and the dependence of majority of countries in coal as the most abundant and widely distributed fossil fuel. And the author also cited some authors for that claim. And in the second paragraph, the author is now establishing the niche by saying that there is a missing, there is something wrong with the current practices where the fly ash emitted is collected, but these are being disposed instead of being used, and argue that sustainable development is a need of society, and there should be a mechanism to convert this fly ash waste into a useful product instead of throwing it. And finally, in the last paragraph, they are now stating what they are aiming to do. So even if they did not really said that the purpose of the study is, or the aim of the study, but we can understand from this statement that this is the aim of this study. And you also have here another example. The general area of research is about the textile industry. Since this research was conducted in India, and we know that textile industry is a booming industry in India, and how textile industry contributes to the economy in India. However, there is some problems, as there are some unsafe working conditions. So now the researchers are establishing the problem, or some issues that needs solution. And in the last parts, they are now saying that there is something that could be done to correct and avoid this unsafe working condition. And this will now be their the aim or the purpose, where they occupy the niche for their research. So I hope that the discussion on writing the background of the study using the CARS framework, Move 1, Move 2, and Move 3 will help you write a highly evidence-based background of the study. So we are now done with the background of the study, and we are now moving on to the statement of the problem. So what is the statement of the problem? So the statement of the problem is an explanation in research that describes the issue that is in need of study. In this part, you have to think of answering the question, what problem is the research attempting to address? Having a problem statement allows the reader of your research later on to quickly understand the purpose and the intent of your research. That is why it is very important to write this part of your paper appropriately, answering the question, what problem is your research attempting to address? In writing your statement of the problem, it is expected to be brief and concise, and you should not include yet the findings of the research or the detailed data, since your aim in this part is just really to say what the problem is. So avoid discussing the findings of your research if you're already done with your research, or describing the detailed data that you have gathered from your data gathering. And since it is going to be a statement of the problem, in as much as possible, the average length of your research problem statement should generally be about at least or at most 1 page. And this part is going to define the problem, which cannot be thought of as a gap in the information base, because there may be several solutions to the gap or to the lack of information, but that is not the concern of the problem statement. The purpose of your problem statement is to summarize the current information and where a lack of knowledge may be representing a problem that needs to be investigated. So take note of the term lack of knowledge, because basically if there is just that knowledge that could answer the question, that could solve the problem, then there's really no need to conduct the research after all. So that's why you really have to identify the lack of knowledge that presents the problem that needs to be investigated. So the purpose of the problem statement now is to identify the problem, to define the problem, and to propose a solution, to propose a research for a solution, or demonstrate why further information is needed in order for a solution to become possible. Because research is basically inquiry, search for information. It is where you inquire of something. And you do research because there is something that you do not know, or we do not know, scholars do not know, and because of that gap in knowledge about something, people cannot solve the problem. People cannot move forward. There's still an issue that's ongoing. So you have to state that, you remember that in writing the statement of the problem. You really have to be aware of that lack of knowledge that presses the need also to do the research. Here are different types of research gaps, or these are the lack of knowledge that can help us to identify whether there is really a research gap also in our field of research or inquiry. So it is important for us to really understand also these research gaps, for us to know where we can contextualize or put our research into. So we have here the first one, the evidence gap, or contradictory evidence gap. So it is defined as such that the results from studies allow for conclusions in their own right, but these results are contradictory when examined from a more abstract point of view. So there are studies that have been conducted about a particular topic, say for example, in our example, stress. So many studies have been conducted about stress, but one author said another thing, another one said a different thing based on their results. So as you can see, there is there is a contradiction with the results. So this now presents us with an evidence gap or a contradictory evidence gap. And your goal now is to really find which of these two authors or which of these different or contradictory results is near to the truth. So the purpose now of your research is to identify which of this is really saying the truth. So that's the evidence gap. Another kind of research gap is the knowledge gap or the knowledge void gap. It is when the desired research findings do not exist. Say for example, there is a need to produce a medicine to cure cancer. And since there is a lack of knowledge on producing a medicine or a pill to cure cancer, there is something that is unknown yet. So this presents us with a knowledge void gap. Another research gap is practical knowledge gap. This happens when professional behavior or practices deviate from research findings or are not covered by research. So this is prevalent, for example, for those researchers who are exposed also in the field, in the practice, in the professions where their research is also connected. Say, for example, in management or in business, when there are practices or things that professionals do in the actual practices that doesn't align with what research findings say. So this gives us now an opportunity to do a research because there is a gap between practice and what research says. So there's a practical knowledge gap. Another kind of research gap is the methodological gap. Methodological gap occurs when a variation of research method is necessary to generate new insights or to avoid distorted findings. So there are different methods in doing or research design, if you can still remember. In general, we can approach it as qualitative, quantitative, or mixed. And there could be a gap also based on the way that previous researchers do their research or do their data gathering. So it gives us now this what we call methodological gap, which gives us an opportunity to do further research if we can justify that there is a necessity to generate new insights since there are distorted findings because of this methodological gap. Another research gap type is empirical gap. This happens when research findings or propositions need to be evaluated or empirically verified. So there are already research findings or results and or theories, and you want to validate these theories or these results or these findings. So this gives us now this empirical gap, and this is another opportunity for us to do research. Another research gap type is theoretical gap. Theory should be applied to certain research issues to generate new insights. There is a lack of theory, thus a gap exists. So the purpose now of your research is to develop theories that can be applied, that can be used, that can be validated to find to gain new insights, and hopefully these insights can now solve a problem. So this is a theoretical gap. And finally, we have the population gap. This happens when the research regarding the population that is not adequately represented or under-researched in the evidence-based or prior research. Population gap could be there's a gap in terms of gender, in terms of race or ethnicity, age, and etc. Say for example, there is a research on stress, but these research are highly focused on the white races. So what if there is a difference also in terms of how they deal with stress, with the black or with other races? So it presents us with a population gap. So you have to think and try to answer the following questions. How will your research contribute to the existing knowledge base in your field of study? Now, your research gap is the answer to this question, because when you can now connect what is not known to the solution of the to get a solution to that problem, then you are now having a contribution. This is now your contribution to the existing knowledge base on your field of study. So the answer to your knowledge gap, to the evidence gap, to the practical knowledge gap, methodological gap, empirical gap, theoretical gap, or population gap now becomes your contribution to the existing knowledge base in your field of study. Another question that you have to think is, how is it significant? Now that you have identified a gap in research, is it really significant? So you can answer the question, so what? And who cares about that gap? Because not all gap are not necessarily, it doesn't mean that it's a gap that it's also significant or it's also necessary. So you have to think why your gap, why answering that gap matters. And as you think of that, maybe you can come to the answer that because when you answer that gap, when you have that answer to that unknown phenomena, then we can solve the problem. And the third question is, why does it matter? So still, so what and who cares? So in writing your statement of the problem, you have to really understand what's the research gap in your study. Now, how to write a statement of problem in your research proposal? Because at this point, you are writing your research proposal. So first, it is helpful to begin with your goal. So think about, what do you see as the achievable goal if the problem that you outline is solved? If the gap in research is being answered, what do you see as the achievable goal? So what is your general goal? How will the proposed research theoretically change anything? And what are the potential outcomes as a result of your research findings? Then you can discuss how the problem prevents the ability to reach your realistic and achievable solution. So this is what stands in the way of changing an issue for the better. So talk about the present state of affairs and how the problem impact a person's life, for example. So since there is an issue and there is a question that has not been answered, what is the effect of this question not being answered? How does it affect, for example, the people who is directly related or affected in your research area? And it's also helpful at this point to generally lay out the present knowledge of the subject, then describe the gaps of knowledge that we have just described a while ago. So your problem statement is a proposed solution now to address one of these gaps. And take note, a good problem statement will also lay out the repercussions of leaving the problem as it currently stands. If the questions will not be answered, what will be the effect? What will be the result of that if we left it hanging? So what is the significance of not addressing this problem? What are the possible future outcomes of that? So in this way, you are really trying to convince the reader how important solving this problem is in your statement of the problem. For us to have a framework in writing the statement of the problem, I am now presenting the context significant solution model in writing the problem statement. It consists of 3 steps. We have step 1, where you will write or present the context. So in this section, you explain the background of your research. It identifies the problem and describes an ideal scenario that could exist in the absence of the problem. It also includes past attempts and shortcomings at solving the problem. So these past attempts are those previous research, previous attempts to solve this pressing issue. Step 2 would now be the significance. In this section, you define how the problem prevents the real scenario or the ideal scenario from being achieved, including its negative impacts on the society or field of research. It should also include how or who will be the most affected by a solution to the problem. So the relevance of the study that you are proposing and how it can contribute to the existing body of knowledge. And in step 3, the solution. So in this section, you describe the aim and objectives of your research and your solution to overcome the problem. Finally, it need not focus on a perfect solution, but rather on addressing a realistic goal to move closer to the ideal scenario. Let's dissect each of these steps one by one. So in step number one, where you present the context, you can follow this language for establishing the context. You may say the problem that this study addresses. So here you begin with a clear indication that the problem statement is going to be discussed next, as you are now saying that the problem that this study addresses. So in this prompt, the reader will be informed of what to expect next. So for example, the problem that this study addresses is the frequent failure of steam turbine blades in power plants, which leads to costly downtime and maintenance. Previous research has identified various factors that contribute to blade failure, such as a high cycle fatigue, creep, and material degradation. But there is a lack of understanding of the interactions between these factors and how they affect blade performance. So as you can see, you are trying now to state the problem in a way that you're also discussing previous attempts in solving the problem and the lack of understanding. This is now the gap, the research gap that we have learned a while ago. Step two is now your significance. You now have to mention the consequences of not solving the problem. So you can say, as a consequence of the problem at hand. So you can touch upon who is or who will be affected if the problem continues, and how these people will be affected as a consequence of not solving the problem. So an example of significance. The consequences of not solving this problem are significant, including reduced power generation capacity, increased maintenance cost, and potential safety hazards. So you are now saying that as a result of the knowledge gap about this issue, it could now affect the power generation, it could now increase maintenance costs, and it may also have some potential safety hazards, which is very important to the company or to the people who are working in the company. And finally, the solution. So in this part, you conclude with indicating the type of research or information that is needed to solve the problem that you have just stated. So in this part, be sure to reference authors who may have suggested also the necessity of such research. So that's why you really have to read also what other researchers or other authors have said as a possible solution or the necessity of solving this problem. So you can say this investigation aims to. So it is now it's now a restating of your statement, your purpose statement. Here an example. This study aims to address this gap. So take note that this gap has been discussed in step number one, the lack of understanding about this phenomenon. So this study aims to address this gap by investigating the microstructural and mechanical properties of steam turbine blade materials and their correlation with blade failure mechanisms. The research question is, how do microstructural and mechanical properties of turbine blade materials affect their fatigue and creep resistance, and what is the relationship between these properties and blade failure mechanisms? So now there is a research question following the research aim. The study will use advanced characterization techniques, which is the methods now, such as scanning, electron microscopy, and mechanical testing to analyze the materials, and will also involve simulation and modeling of blade behavior. The results of the study can inform the design and manufacture of turbine blades with improved reliability and durability, leading to increased efficiency and reduced downtime and maintenance cost in power plants. So to put all of this together, we now have our statement of the problem. We have the first paragraph from step number one, we have the second paragraph from step number two, and we have the third paragraph from step number three. So you can also follow those steps and those important points as you write the statement of the problem. So far, we have finished background of the study and the statement of the problem. Now, we will move to discussing the objectives of the study. But what is the difference between the research objective and the research aim. So the difference can actually be classified in terms of the difference in terms of focus and the difference in terms of form. Because in terms of focus, the research aim describes the central goal or the purpose. So that's why the research aim is actually the statement of purpose or the purpose statement of the study. It broadly indicates what is to be achieved, while research objectives, on the other hand, specify how it will be achieved. So your research aim is the what, and your research objective, on the other hand, is the how. The research aim is the overall goal, while your research objective is the specific goal. Thus, the research objective divides the main aim, the overall goal, into parts and addresses each of these parts separately. In terms of form, the research aim is expressed as a single sentence or a short paragraph, while the research objectives are listed out in numbered form or could also be in a bulleted or in a running text. So that is how we can differentiate them in terms of the focus and in terms of the form. Develop the research objective. First is you have to develop the problem statement, which is what we did in the previous slides. So you have to come up with a problem statement describing the problem that needs solving. No, it could be from a controversy, a knowledge gap, aspect that can be improved or enhanced, along with your rationale, which justifies your study. So you then formulate out of this problem the central question of your study that is to be answered based on the study findings. So as you can see in this illustration, we have the broad area, and that from that broad area, based on your literature search and based on the current trends of research, you now have a problem statement. And from doing literature search, current trends, inputs from experts and peers, frameworks, and other approach to narrow down this problem to a research question. So you are narrowing the problem into your research question or the central question of the study. So from the central question, you formulate the hypothesis. So the research hypothesis is basically the formal prediction that is to be investigated. So just like in our previous example, what are the different things that may affect the efficiency of the turbine blades? So you are now formulating the hypothesis. So where do we put our objective? So the research objective now will specify how the research question will be answered. In other words, the objective determines what is to be measured to test the hypothesis. So if your research is hypothesis based, you have hypothesis, your objective should be based on that hypothesis. And that hypothesis must be based on your research question. Your research question, which should be based from your problem, and finally the problem based on the broad area of research. So this is where you develop, or how you can develop, your research objective. Because in some research where, say for example, you do not have hypothesis, it could be that your objective can be linked directly to your problem statement, to the problem that you are investigating. Your objective now is to find a solution to that problem. But if your research involves a central question which can be tested through a hypothesis, then your objective should be based on those hypotheses. Here are some pointers in writing the objective of your study. So objective guides the choice or development of the necessary methodology for your study. So that is why it's really very important to set the objective, a good objective for your research. Also take note that the objectives and the research question should also be aligned with the overall problem as discussed previously. So this overall problem is from your problem statement. So they should be intricately related in such a way that the objective cannot be met without answering the research questions. So the objective of the study. So in framing your research objective, you can follow the following. First, your objective should be SMART. So what do we mean by that is that SMART is an acronym which means specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-based. So think about your objectives. Is it specific? Is it measurable? It means that there is a way by which we can quantify or qualify it. Is it attainable given the time constraints, budget constraints, your skills as a researcher? Is it relevant also? You should answer the question with whether it's would someone care about that? Is it time-based? Can you be able to finish your research within the time that will be given to you to conduct or to implement your proposal? Aside from that, your objective should be stated using action verbs. Example of these action verbs are, for example, to investigate, to explore, to ascertain the impact of, or to compare. So think of those action verbs and use that as you write or frame your research objective. And finally, your objective should be stated in a logical sequence. So there should also be, it should not just be randomly scattered all around, the sentences or the paragraph. It should be logically arranged also. So here's of the objective of the study. So we have here, the overall goal of this study is to understand how microstructural and mechanical properties of turbine blade materials affect their fatigue and creep resistance. So as you can see, this is your research aim because you are describing the purpose or the overall goal of your research. Now your specific objectives are the following based on this research: to characterize the microstructure and mechanical properties of steam turbine blades materials and identify variations in these properties that may contribute to blade failure. The second objective is to investigate the effects of high cycle fatigue and creep on the performance of steam turbine blades and identify the underlying mechanisms of failure. And finally, to develop a predictive model that relates the microstructural and mechanical properties of turbine blade materials to identify design parameters that can improve blade performance and durability. So if you look at it, you are beginning your objectives of the study with the general goal, which is your research aim, and followed by your specific objective, each of which is started with an action verbs, like to characterize, to investigate, to develop. And take note, this objective is still based on the hypothesis that these researchers have for this inquiry. It could also be written in this way, as you can see in this example, where the researchers really set numbers which are also measurable. Because take note that your objective should also be measurable. There should also be a way by which we can say that you have achieved these objectives at the end of your research. Another example of the objectives of the study. And finally, we have this one. So in all of this, basically you're just starting with the overall goal of the research or the research aim, followed by the specific objectives, which are SMART, which are using action verbs. We're moving on with the significance of the study. So the significance of the study is its importance. So it refers to the contributions to and the impact of the study on the research field. So the significance signals who benefits from the research findings and how they will benefit. So take note of the word research findings or research results. So this is where you base. So based on these research findings or research results, who will benefit from your research? So in writing your significance statement, you can follow this sequence. So first, you can think of the gaps your study is setting out to address. So this is the research gap that we have explained a while ago. And look at your research from general and specific angles in terms of its potential contribution. In general, how will your research contribute, say, for example, to the society? In specific angles, maybe you can also check how will your research can contribute to specific group of people or to individuals or to a community. Here are some ways to begin your statement of significance. So you can write it in such a way that maybe you are saying the particular significance of this study lies in the. So now you are saying that you are stating or prompting the reader that the succeeding lines, the succeeding words will be stating the significance of the study. You can also use the phrase, we argue that this study moves the field forward. So based on the research gap, you are arguing that this study moves the research field forward, and you will state the reason why you think so. You can also state it this way. This study makes some important contributions too. And now you will declare who will be these people who will benefit from your study. Or you may also state in this way, our findings deepen the current understanding about. So it doesn't really have to be what we've learned before, where we just simply write the people or the group of people who will benefit and how they will benefit. But you can actually write the statement of significance in such a way that you're saying how the study is significant in terms of how it contributes to moving the field of inquiry, in answering the research gap, in solving practical problems, or in what we have accustomed in its contributions to specific people or groups of people. So here are some things that we have to avoid in writing the significant statement. Do not make it too long. So try to make it concise as possible. Do not repeat any information that has been presented in the other sections. Do not overstate or exaggerate the importance. And it should match also with your actual findings. Because later on when you're done with your paper, you have to revise your paper. You have to make it again in such a way that it's already finished. You have to write in a way that's already done. So when that is the case, then you have to make sure that the importance or significance of your study is matching the actual findings. So here how you can write the significance of the study. So the significance of this study lies in its potential to improve the reliability and safety of steam turbines in power plants by identifying the underlying cause of blade failures, by characterizing the microstructure and mechanical properties of the turbine blade materials, and investigating the effects of high cycle fatigue and creep on their performance. This study aims to provide new insights into the complex issues of blade failure. The findings of this study may inform the development of predictive models that can identify design parameters for improving blade performance and durability, ultimately contributing to the efficient and sustainable operation of the power plants. So even if the authors did not discuss specific people who will benefit, but from this statement alone, we can really say that this study has some significance or is significant because also of the justification that they said, as a support to their claim that it has potential to improve the reliability and safety of steam turbines. But again, you can still use this format where you write who will benefit and how they will benefit. But do not be limited, again, because significance can be also be in terms of significance to practice or significance to the knowledge. Now we're moving on to the scope and limitations of the study. So the scope and limitations of the study are essential components that could also clarify your research and contextualize your research. So sometimes we neglect this part as if it's not important, but the scope of your study is important because it defines the boundaries of your research, identifying what will be included and excluded from the investigation. Now for the limitation, it now presents the potential challenges or constraints that might affect your ability to achieve the objective. The scope and limitation is important because it gives clarity. So it helps to establish the boundaries of the research project and clarifying what will be investigated and what won't be investigated. So this ensures that the research remains focused and avoid unnecessary diversions that might derail your objective. The second one is transparency. So the scope and limitations of your study will help make the research more transparent because it will provide a clear understanding of what you intend to do, what you intend to achieve, and what your study's limitations are. And finally, it's important because it helps manage expectations. So the scope and limitation of the study will help to manage the expectations of the stakeholders, your target beneficiaries, the funding agency, your supervisors, advisors, panelists, and even the participants of your study. So this ensures that everyone involved in the research understands what the study can and cannot achieve. So remember, your research must ensure clarity, transparency, and manage expectations, and you can put all of this all together in the scope and limitations of your study. Here is an example how to write the scope and limitations of the study. So let us read. The scope of this study is to investigate the effect of adding carbon fiber to a polypropylene matrix composite material in improving its mechanical properties. The study will focus on investigating the effect of different amounts of carbon fiber on the tensile strength, compressive strength, and impact strength of the composite material. So in this first paragraph, the author is writing the scope of the study, the focus of the study, what they will do, what they will not do. And in the succeeding sentences, the author writes the limitation of the study. So the limitation of this study are as follows. The study will only investigate the effect of carbon fiber on the mechanical properties of polypropylene matrix composite material. Other types of matrix materials and fibers will not be considered. So you are now putting some limitations. So you are now saying what you will do, what you will not really do. The study will only investigate the effect of different amounts of carbon fiber on the mechanical properties of the composite material. Other factors that may affect the properties of the composite material, such as manufacturing process and temperature, will not be considered. The study will be limited to laboratory testing of the composite material. The finding of the study may not be directly applicable to real-world applications due to variations in manufacturing processes and environmental factors. And finally, the sample size of the study may be limited by the availability of resources and funding. The findings of the study may not be generalizable to other populations or samples. So as you can see, this scope and limitations, the way that it's stated, helps to clarify what the researchers intended to do, what they want to. It will also help make the research results more transparent, as they are already saying here that the findings of the study cannot be generalizable. They cannot really make a conclusion that can be, that we can say that's applicable to everyone, to all situations. And it will also help manage the expectations of those people who will rely on the results of the study. Finally, you have the definition of terms, the last part of the problem, and it's the definition of term is also an important section of the research paper, because this is where you will define key terms that will be used in your study. So in our research, there will be some technical terms, jargon that we will use, and the readers may not have a knowledge of this research. Say, for example, they are from other fields or other disciplines, so they cannot understand these terms. So you have to identify the key terms. Do not put all terms, only the key terms, the technical terms in your paper. So you should write the definition of these terms in your definition of terms section. So it will ensure now that these ambiguities or misunderstanding about these terminologies will be answered. It will ensure also that the reader will have a clear understanding of what you mean and what they use when they use these specific terms. So again, identify all key terms used in your study, provide a concise definition of each term, and explain how each term relates to the study. So here how you can write the definition of terms. So here are some technical terms that is related to our example study, and the definition of these terms based on this study. Take note that these definitions should not necessarily be definitions coming from dictionary, but definitions that is based on your study. The operational definition. How do these terms, what are the meaning of these terms, of these different terms in your study? Now we just finished our discussion on writing chapter 1, the problem and its background. I hope that you learned from this discussion and be able to apply what you've learned in writing your research paper, in writing your thesis or proposal. If you learned something from this lecture, feel free to share out this video to others.